Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for watching. Well, with the Obama inauguration over, attention in this state turns to what else? The state deficit and the big budget battle, the looming budget battle, plus the transportation needs of that state, all that and more following these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. First of all, let me thank Governor Rendell, who hosted the program in my absence. So we've had Senator Specter and Governor Rendell, one Republican, I guess, one Democrat we know, that have hosted the show in the past. We're into bipartisanship. Actually, we're into nonpartisanship on this show. And let's go to a little legislative update. Big battle in Harrisburg. Guess what it's going to be in your state capital, the state budget. Joining me, as often is the case, right across there, sitting in front of me, John Micek with the Allentown Morning Call, and Brad Bumsted with the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review. Journalists, bloggers, columnists, you guys do it all, don't you? You do, don't you? You guys,
I don't blog.
You don't. You just write a column. You blog.
I've been known to pick up a video camera from time to time.
Hey,
as well.
good for you. Well, look, John Micek, look, you've a long time. You've covered this state. We are in for one heck of a ride this spring, and maybe into the summer with the budget. Explain it to our viewers.
I mean, thanks to the cratering national economy, we're feeling the effects here in Pennsylvania. Tax collections are off. It seems like the budget deficit now is a moving target. As we sit here today, it's $1.9 billion, right. Revised up from 1.7 tail end of last year. We're now told that over 2 years it could be as much as $4 billion, or as little. It could expand to $4 billion, or be as much as $5 billion. It's pretty dire.
Now, Brad, the governor and the legislature have done some things already to try to ameliorate it with a round of cuts. What has the state done to sort of position itself? Because obviously everybody realizes we're going to end the year with a big deficit, as John points out, the exact amount yet unknown.
Well, Governor Rendell has cut $500 million, and he's put a salary freeze in effect, no increases, no COLAs for people under his employ. But look, when you look at how they're going to resolve this, Representative Dwight Evans, chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, says there are essentially three areas. The $750 million rainy day fund, right. Whatever stimulus money comes from the federal government, and taxes or fees. Yeah. And he says that one area won't do it. It's going to have to be probably a combination of those.
Yeah, John, you've covered a lot of these budget battles in the past. As I go back and look at past recessions where deficits haven't been this large, the T word, the T word comes to mind. I mean, they even had a tax hike in 2003 when the economy wasn't that bad. Mm-hmm. And there are some differences. Senate Republicans not wowed about it, but maybe some divisions
who actually break out in hives at the mere mention of tax increases.
Yeah.
The Senate Republican leadership has been pretty adamant about not wanting to pass any sort of general tax increase. The question now becomes is whether or not they can hold that line if revenues continue to plummet the way they are. Everyone talks about spending cuts and everyone talks about making state government more efficient. But the reality is you can only go so far and so deep on that kind of thing because you have all this stuff tied up in fixed costs and things and mandates that you have to pay for.
Good point, yeah.
So there's really not a lot of wiggle room when it comes to the general fund budget.
Now, in the past, Brad, as you know, again, you've covered this stuff for a long time, they've usually increased the taxes and then brought them down in subsequent years. No governor really wants to leave with a higher tax, right. Particularly income tax. They've not touched the sales tax. They've talked about, maybe extending it to things not covered, excluding food and clothing. There aren't a lot of options here, are there?
No, there aren't. There's talk of a tax on the revenues from the Marcellus Shale, right. As an energy tax. But the governor has said only as a last resort will he look at taxes, general tax increases on sales or income. Now, the interesting scenario you mentioned is with the Senate Republicans. President Pro Tem Joe Scarnati told me in an interview that he will not support any tax increases. And I said, well, what about fees? No. I said, what about minor tax increases? No. No taxes, period, he said.
But
I know.
I mean, in the past,
it's a great bumper sticker, but it's whether or not when it comes down.
But your point, I mean, and it was well made, is, and we're not getting into whether we favor a tax hike or not. We're just pointing out that historically, that's had to be because I don't know what the exact percentage is, and maybe you know, maybe you don't. 75–80% of the cost of state government, as you point out, pretty fixed, isn't it?
It is.
You got these mandates. You've got somebody's going to have to pay.
Education is riddled with mandates.
Yeah,
it's
healthcare,
the social welfare programs in the Department of Public Welfare. There's all of this stuff throughout the budget that you really can't mess with at all.
All right, I want to get to Governor Rendell has taken some heat over this appointment of a former legislator from the Northwest to a position, $95,000 in an area called the Wilds, which I'll let you explain that, which. He's taken a lot of criticism because of the hiring freeze. Governor's gotten a little testy about that. I mean, he's pretty up. Go ahead. Did he get testy with you?
Well, not with me personally, but he told reporters to get off their butts and go up to the Pennsylvania Wilds and see how this is received up there. Look, there's no question that Dan Sura is completely overqualified to do this job as an advisor to the Secretary of Conservation and Natural Resources. No question about it. But there was a hiring freeze in place when the governor appointed him, and they didn't post the job for anyone else to apply. It appears to be a job created for Dan Sura, who was defeated in November.
And that's not unusual. As you know, former legislators often come back to Harrisburg. All right, we're going to go to a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about a couple other legislative update items following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by PAConstructionJobs.com. For more information about rewarding careers in the highway construction industry, visit PAConstructionJobs.com. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to the program. We're doing a quick legislative update. John, you know, typically former legislators would be hired back into the legislature. Not a lot of uproar because they do have a lot of expertise in these policy areas. And it's true there's a certain amount of, you know, you were up here, you know, cronyism involved, but it's not unusual. I guess what surprised me was rather than having remained employed in the legislative branch where there probably would not have been any questions raised, no hiring freeze, the governor's office chose to do it that way. Go ahead.
I mean, they're trying to put lipstick on an elk, I guess, in this particular case, rather than lipstick on a pig, given the geography. But you know, it's just amazing how tenured they were about the whole thing. Yeah. Mere weeks ago, they're crying poverty and saying, you know, the social interest groups, mental health, mental retardation, they're going to have to forego increases. You know, the people who do drug and alcohol funding or counseling are going to have to go without state funding increases. There's a hiring freeze on. They're skipping raises.
There's a symbolism. You think it's symbolically, obviously.
But yet they find, you know, no offense to Mr. Sura, but yet they find $95 grand for this position, and it looks like it was created. And they said they looked around and their eyes alighted on Mr. Sura, and they said, "Aha, we found the guy." I was one of those guys that the governor grumbled at.
Oh, you were grumbled at.
Last week at the farm show. Okay. You know, and I asked him, I said, you know, doesn't this create the impression that there was a thumb on the scale when it comes to this position? Because it wasn't advertised. It wasn't, you know, no one else was interviewed. And the governor said something really quite shocking and maybe this sort of revelatory moment inadvertently, that he said the thumb is always on the scale. When it comes to hiring for state jobs.
Which particularly at a certain level.
Which is understandable. There's a certain limited universe to that. But it also says a lot about the way they approach these things.
Brad, let me switch subjects. You know, back on this budget, I mean, there's a roiling debate about what the legislature should do with, what, $240 million, am I close, in their caucus in their caucus accounts, and whether they should put them back into the pot. They're sitting on $240 million in their caucus accounts. They don't roll. They roll over into a new fiscal year. These are to run the legislature, but it's far more than they need to run the legislature.
Right, and this whole fund was perpetrated by the late Matt Ryan, who believed that in a budget impasse, they need this to be able to continue to operate. Now, this is the toughest year for them to give that up because they could be in session well past July. But They only need by
30, 40 million maybe?
Maybe 60, 70 at most.
Yeah,
you know.
to get through. So they don't need the amount of money they have, and that would go.
No.
And that's real money. That's not a little, that's not 25, 30 million. We're talking about real money.
That's real money, and there's a lot of debate about what to do with that, but I think a lot of the Republicans I've talked to think it should just go into reducing the deficit.
Yeah. Brad, before we let you guys go, there's been a lot of discussion lately about the gaming board and what it's up to, and 3 sites of the proposed that are in the law that for gaming are not yet up and running. 1 in Pittsburgh, 2 in Philadelphia. The biggest money raisers, I guess, for the state. Where does all that stand? Give us a quick update.
Well, it's remarkable the amount of revenue that they have pulled in from the sites that are open.
Yeah.
But the 3 big money makers aren't open yet. 2 in Philadelphia and 1 in Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh casino's under construction. They're still messing around in Philadelphia, even with the site and where it's going to be.
Right.
The latest wrinkle to that is that Donald Trump, who lost,
know who he is.
yeah, we do, who lost a bid to get a casino license, has gone into federal court, not the state court, to try to overturn the licensing decision, and he's asked the Gaming Control Board to reconsider the licensing. Now, normally it would say, A, it's sour grapes, and B, there's not much chance, but Trump's got a lot of money. And
the one in Pittsburgh is under construction,
yes,
right?
It is.
I mean, so that's not in Philly. They haven't started. They can't even agree. I guess there's been a decision on one of the sites,
right? As
I understand it, but they're nowhere near beginning construction.
No, it's just turmoil, constantly about that. But Pittsburgh looks like it's going to be okay. But you've got this problem now with Trump, who can't be easily dismissed just because of the press he gets and the exposure.
Right. I want to thank both you guys for coming in. All right, the transportation needs of the state, everybody understands they're real. 1.7, 1.8 billion a year needed to get our roads and bridges up to what? To some kind of standard. Back with that in a moment, following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, we're going to continue our discussion about Pennsylvania's roads, bridges, and mass transit. As everybody knows, this is a very serious problem. They're dealing with it at the federal government, trying to deal with it. The state has tried to come up with differing ways to fund these very, very important needs. Joining me, as sometimes is the case, is Bob Latham. He's sitting right here in front of me to my left, Associated Pennsylvania Constructors, and Bill Stout. He's the chairman and CEO of Gannett Fleming, is an engineering and design firm. You're based in Camp Hill, do I got that right?
Yes.
But you have offices like a lot of different places.
We have
right?
over 50 offices.
Wow.
In the United
Wow.
States.
Well, we got a guy on here who knows what he's talking about. All right, Bob, let me start with you. I want to go back to the original point. And 2 years ago, now maybe 3 years ago, we had this commission report that no one has challenged about the needs. Just give us a quick, 30-second. What did it say? What did it say?
Terry, basically, we have about $1.8 billion funding gap between our needs on highways and transit in Pennsylvania and what we funded. In the meantime, the legislature did pass Act 44 that filled some of that gap, but not all of that. Now some of that has been challenged or lost because of the I-80 tolling controversy. But you're right. What nobody has challenged is the need. I think that there is an agreement out, even in the general public and amongst our leaders, that we have a serious infrastructure problem, a transportation problem, but we haven't been able to get to a solution.
Yeah, and there is actually, Bill, let me turn to you. There is actually a consensus. I mean, we've got Democrats and Republicans on this program for 12 years now, and they can fight about a lot of things, but there doesn't seem, I guess what I don't understand, there is no argument about the need.
I don't think there is, and I think part of it has been that the engineering and construction industry has been doing its very best, particularly over the last 7 or 8 years, to highlight the problems with infrastructure. But I think what really has gotten the public and our politicians' attention are some of the catastrophes that we've had in the last 5 years. We've had a blackout in the Northeast 5 years ago. We had the failure of levees as a result of Katrina. We had a steam line in New York City erupt. We had a bridge fail in Minneapolis. And just last month we had a very large main break in Bethesda, Maryland, and almost swamped a car.
The other thing that's sort of interesting is that everybody understands that without a modern infrastructure, the economy just isn't going to work. I mean, you know, you've got to have a modern transportation system. And look at our location. You know, we stand between the Midwest and New England the last time I looked, right, to get goods back and forth. I mean, that's sort of a critical dimension of this as well. It's not just within our own state. It's the necessity for us in terms of economic development in the nation.
I think where it's broken down, Terry, is that we have not put together or we have not agreed upon a vision of what a modern transportation system in Pennsylvania looks like. An intermodal system that includes not just highways, but a good highway component, but freight rail, passenger rail, intercity public transit, and also an adequate air transportation system. We haven't developed that vision and gone forward and said to the citizens, what are you willing to pay for in order to have this modern system? What we've done is we've looked for political quick fixes, patchworks and things like that. I'm very encouraged that some of the leadership in the legislature now, the new Speaker, Keith McCall, former Transportation Committee Chairman, new Chairman Rob Wunderling, a lot of new energy on the Senate side, really interested in looking and answering that question and moving forward with it.
Now, Governor Rendell keeps talking about what the federal government can do. You know, there's the stimulus package as we speak is being discussed in Washington, and I may get the number not exactly right. There's something like $450 million he hopes will come to our state in the stimulus package. What's the situation with that?
Well, I think he's hoping for a whole lot more than $400 or $500 million.
No, I mean for roads, bridges, he wants more than that?
I think he'd like to see more.
Okay.
Some of the lists that we've seen exceed $1 billion in additional spending for the state. And as Bob just mentioned, you know, we've identified that our shortfall is on the order of $1.7 billion. What you can tell from that is that it simply partly dents what we really need. And his comments with respect to the need for developing long-term funding solutions are critical. This stimulus package is a wonderful thing to give us a little shot in the arm. While we're doing that, we've got to solve the long-term problem.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to debate the stimulus package and whether it helps stimulate immediately. Notwithstanding that, there is still the bigger point that over the next couple of years, whether, you know, you put the jobs out there, we're talking about a huge percentage of jobs that would be created, but not just make work. This would be important work to make sure that we have the infrastructure necessary to keep, you know, continue to develop a modern economy.
We've been talking with PennDOT over the last several months, and I can tell you that they are being very diligent and working with what are known as metropolitan planning organizations to make sure that the projects that would be funded by the stimulus package will have a lasting and important effect on repairing some of the needs on our transportation system. So we will be able to do some real repairs and some good fixes, and like you said, the industry is poised and ready to hire people back, put them back to work. The problem is if we don't have a long-term program past this 1 year or 90-day stimulus, companies like Gannett Fleming aren't going to be able to invest because there's uncertainty as to what the market. We could see a market that skyrockets and falls back, you know, like a flare.
All right, we're going to go to a break. We're going to talk about the long-term implications that this has for our state following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Penn Future, where we believe that every environmental victory grows the economy, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
All right, welcome back to the program. We're talking about the big infrastructure needs. Look, Bill, we've been chatting about roads and bridges, but there's more at stake here. There's water and sewer. There's a big bond issue, which I thought skirted past, but, you know, who knew it was even on the ballot? Talk a little bit about that relationship.
Well, the bond issue that you referred to was an additional $400 million in bonds in Pennsylvania for water and sewer infrastructure needs. Yeah. That was in addition to $800 million that was in the budget for the 2008-9 year, a total of $1.2 billion. Sounds like a lot of money. The needs in Pennsylvania in water sewer infrastructure are just as great as they are in transportation. We need an additional $35 billion over the next 20 years to bring the water and sewer infrastructure up to speed.
We are really paying a price for decades of neglect.
Absolutely.
I mean, this sounds like a lot of money, and a lot of folks are going, oh, we're going to have to pay for it. I'm going to get to you about that. We're going to have to pay for it. We're going to have to pay for it. But the fact is, you can't go decades and neglect the infrastructure and not expect to have a big ticket item at the end of the day, can you?
No. I mean, we built the infrastructure, and it was a tremendous boon to economic growth, and it has maintained a standard of living in this country that is terrific. But if we continue to neglect it, it's going to begin to restrict our economy in so many ways that it's really imperative that we now make the investments.
All right, last question to you.
Yes.
Is the public going to pay for this?
Our governor is part, along with Governor Schwarzenegger and Mayor Bloomberg, of a coalition called Rebuilding America. They just released a poll that said that 80% of people are willing to pay. Our studies show that if there can be some sort of correlation between improvements to the system where the public can really see that their dollars are being spent wisely and being spent on what they think they're funding, they'll support it.
Good point. Great update. All right. As always, thanks for watching. I want to point out one thing. Remember, we're #1 in our time spot in WGAL. It's thanks to you and to our viewers around the state as well. Thank you. And as always, stay well.